Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm a Vedic astrologer of some 35, close to 35 years experience. I'm going to talk to you this week about um, global economy, fears of war, and also problems with um, internal conflicts within countries. And the main reason I'm doing this is to try to uh, correct some of the um, or try to ameliorate or calm down some of the amped up rhetoric we've been getting lately about um, massive system changes or disruptions or massive events occurring that will be detrimental to the world at large and maybe even cause wars. So I think uh, one of the things I would like to say is, again, this is a standard message on YouTube. Uh, I would encourage you to subscribe, like, share the channel with your friends and with people who you think might be interested in this topic, and also to contact me if you would like a reading or lessons. I can be reached at 508-525-0001. Again, that's 508-525-0001. And I can also be reached at GaryGomesG@gmail.com. That's my name, all run together with a G at the end, at gmail.com. So I've been seeing a lot of people, and um, I think it's an astrological tendency that people want to be the people who bring you the big news or announce a major catastrophe or a major problem. And I think that's certainly within the realm of astrology. I think I see too many people. I won't say too many people. I see a lot of people going more for the doom and gloom side of things lately, and that actually does tend to make, oddly enough, that does tend to make negative events more likely. And I'll explain that this to you in a way that makes sense to me. Hopefully, it makes sense to you as well. So I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying this is what I've seen through years. Essentially, folks will have a tendency to is to believe negative events, to believe prophecies of doom more so than they will um, prophecies which indicate uh, good times are coming. And the truth is usually somewhere in the middle. Okay, so I'm not saying that to be contrarian. I'm just saying it just from experience. I've lived through two of the worst or two of the deepest recessions in the United States history. Uh, Essentially, the 1980 to 81 recession was a dramatic drop in productivity, and the 2000s, actually three of the deepest, 2007 to 2008, was the second longest post-war recession, and 2020, obviously, we had the COVID, what I would call the COVID recession, in which essentially it didn't happen because of it happened because of a downturn in the economy because basically countries and uh, were shutting down basically. And so essentially two of those two of those recessions were induced. One was certainly preventable. The 2007 to 2008 recession was certainly preventable, but it was building up for years. The 2000 the 1980 recession was essentially a recession, and that was in response to a combination of high oil prices and uh, an incredibly high rise in the prime interest rate. So if you weren't around at that time, the prime rate was the highest I've ever seen in my lifetime. The prime interest rate in the United States was very high. We actually have warnings about uh, the 2000, the 2000, there was a 2000 recession, which was a long recovery period, which was triggered essentially by the terrorist attacks um, in on the World Trade Center, at least in the United States. That was certainly the cause, but that actually had a global effect. And the 2007 to 2008 was a combination of deregulation, which encouraged uh, invention of all sorts of new instruments of investment, which were kind of shaky, and also the advocacy of people like I can't remember his name, but he was the chair of the Fed. Uh, that people tap into the equity of their homes, and so and, and so you had a largely unstable market. Uh, you had a largely unstable real estate boom, uh, which was built more on speculation than on real supply and demand. The current real estate boom is actually based upon supply and demand. That is, in certain parts of the country, in certain parts of the United States. I don't want to bore you too much with this because a lot of people don't like economic discussions and their eyes sort of glaze over. But what happened was post-COVID, there were there were there were there were two factors that developed in the country. Certain areas felt like they were already overdeveloped. I live in one part of the country which is connected with that. Essentially, I live in Massachusetts, which is part of New England. Massachusetts, in particular, thinks it doesn't it really doesn't want to put up much more new housing, and also in other parts of the country. So you'll see certain parts of the country which are disproportionately affected by housing price increases, but that sort of extends to the entire market. And that's also been kept high, a little bit high by the fact that interest flipped a little bit to make home purchasing or home building more affordable. So home builders have gone into markets in which they can only make money on high-end buildings. Okay, so there's not a lot of affordable housing being built in the country. There's a lot of high-end housing being built in the country. But the 2007, 2008 could have been seen coming because essentially we had a bunch of rampant speculation and um, a bunch of I'm just trying to think of the right word to use so I don't confuse you. and also people being encouraged to almost like the 1929 run, buying on margin, people being encouraged to refinance their homes and also buy homes they couldn't afford because it looked like the market would keep expanding and home prices would keep on accelerating, et cetera, et cetera. So, so essentially, the 2007, 2008 crash was almost like, um, was similar to the Wall Street crash. But let's look at the Mahadishas of the United States just in particular. I'm going to get to the world in a second. I just want to focus on the United States just for 1 second. I will talk about this issue, then I'll talk about your individual astrological maps or the sign maps. Then I'll talk about where I'm expecting to see world problems. Okay, so something like COVID is essentially something like COVID or the World Trade Center bombings are essentially what I would call outside events. They trigger a downturn, and what they did in between 2001 and 2007 was to encourage speculation. What they did after 2007 was they increased the availability of money. So we were used to cheap money for a long time, essentially low or no interest loans. And then around the COVID epidemic, essentially what they did was they pumped a lot of money into the economy. So we're looking at large deficits that really um, we can trace our way back to 1980, even earlier, but they really pushed down the accelerator around 2000 after the World Trade Center bombings. Then again, between 2007 and 2008 with quantitative easing, which was essentially cheap money, and then again in 2020 with um, the monetary returns, which were needed. I'm not opposed to that, but also there was an enormous increase in government spending, which allowed for a rapid recovery from the COVID epidemic, but which also left massive amounts of debt. And I'm not excluding the tax breaks that were instituted in 2000 and 2017. Those also contributed to it. But if you have GDP or gross domestic product, if the economy is producing, those figures can be offset. This is what I learned way back when I was in MBA in an MBA program. Essentially, if the percentage of debt is doesn't outpace economic growth, you're in relatively safe territory. That is, you can pay off your debt relatively quickly. We've seemed to have hit a point where that's not really a case. It's especially not true in Europe. Uh, I don't know how China is faring. Uh, I don't know how India is faring in those things. Those are the other large economies. So we have essentially um, the largest economies in the world right now are the United States, China. I believe it's West. I believe Germany is the third, and then India is the fourth right now. And I think Japan is number five. So anybody out there can correct me if I'm wrong in those estimations, but I believe those are the current standings. So the United States is actually better positioned to pay off its debt than, let's say, West Germany is, or Great Britain is, or the UK is. I don't know how it compares to China and India, to be honest. So, but COVID required a massive amount of expenditures. There was a massive amount of expenditures required to get the economy up and running again quickly. And so we so we do have what I would call kind of a debt crisis right now. But let's look at the United States astrological map going back to 1888, a large economic recession there that's consistent with the Mars subperiod, 1929, and Rahu comes in 1895. That was essentially, um, for lack of a better term, that was both the era of um, huge economic expansion and also enormous social reform. Okay, so that's usually what Rahu subperiods indicate. They indicate major changes in society. Jupiter indicates a return to normalcy, but also foreign involvement. So that was when Wilson was elected. And also kind of a return to what I would call a traditional, a more traditional relationship. So interestingly enough, um, under Taft, under President Taft, the civil service was fully integrated. Um, President Wilson resegregated it. So uh, what and so this isn't saying that Wilson um, was necessarily um, an evil person, but it's just important to know the facts of what happened in history. So during this period, there was a desegregation move. During this period, there was a resegregation move. So that's what Jupiter tends to mean in U.S. charts. Now that doesn't mean that's what's going to happen during the next Jupiter Mahadasha. So keep that in mind. These trends are more connected to recent history, to the recent history of the era, than they are to um, than they are to events recurring. Okay, so the next period, 1929, coincides pretty strongly with the economic recession of the late 1920s. Almost spot on. The Mercury Mahadasha corresponds to technological development. The K2 Mahadasha indicates a return to, or essentially a lot of people dropping out of society, but also a lot of social disruption. And the Venus Mahadasha indicates a sort of return to luxury and materialistic values all the way through 1992. 1992, we had this very strong Sun Mahadasha, which essentially increased foreign involvements. That also happened at the end of the Venus Mahadasha, by the way. But uh, and as a matter of fact, the U.S. has never stayed entirely out of foreign involvement since around 1900. But you know, but the Sun Mahadasha essentially that ushered in what I would call the neoliberal era. It actually happened before that during the first George H.W. Bush administration, but he was more aggressively fought for. And of a Sun Mahadasha in 1992, which also asserted the presidency. We also had a lot of scandals connected with sex. Okay, so Sun, Jupiter, Venus conjunction during this Mahadasha. And 1992, if I recall correctly, yeah, that was the year Clinton got elected. Bill Clinton got elected. And then in 1998, that was the year, I believe, of the start of the Clinton impeachment hearings. So the Moon Mahadasha, Moon's in the third house, is in Aquarius. The United States was in what's called a 7.5 year period of Saturn during that time, sort of like closing it up. And um, so that period would have been detrimental to the leadership of the country. And the United States is in a similar Mahadasha right now. So that's why we've had such a rocky relationship with our leaders over the past, roughly since 2020. I'm sorry, since around 2017 or so. And have and, and the reason I'm saying that is because we're in Rahu right now, and but we're also in a 7.5 year period of Saturn, which essentially makes a scandalous presidency. Okay. Uh, Venus, okay, so Venus, the sun, so moon, but moon was also a time of what I would call high speculation, um, and, and the loosening of rules, and that led to the Mars. Now, Mars, if you look at the U.S. map, Mars is at 0 degrees, 40 minutes. It's incredibly weak in the chart. So so essentially Mars has this crash making facility to it. Saturn does too, but Mars is even more so. Mars is even more dramatic. So 2008, it was just like basically right towards the end of the presidential race. Uh, President Bush calls both presidential candidates into his office, talks with them about what's coming just to warn them what's coming. And then in 2015, we get this large um, shakeup in politics. That's Rahu. Rahu is a reform planet. It's not satisfied with the status quo. It will do anything it can do to change the status quo. Okay? So this Rahu Mahadasha is essentially um, that's really the reason we're seeing so many changes or alterations in the political landscape, and why we're seeing parties seemingly changing or um, damaging themselves through either extreme positions or unpopular policies. And this is true of both parties, okay? Right now, we're in a Mercury subperiod 20, until 2026, March of 2026. So I'm not seeing any major economic problems until November of 2025. And that's because we're in a small Saturn subperiod. Now, small Saturn subperiods don't necessarily cause major problems, but I am expecting to see some domestic violence next year, mainly because the K2 Mahadasha, especially in the 1960s, caused major civil unrest. And there were also several assassinations during the K2 Mahadasha. And so a lot of political leaders were taken out of commission by that during that particular Mahadasha. So I can see that happening in the United States. And I would expect to see an increase in riots next year, not this year. And then we hit. So this will cause some problems with adjustments, some I would say some political violence, more demonstrations. But interestingly enough, the K2 Mahadasha in the late 1960s was one of the most prosperous major planetary periods the United States ever saw. And it's not surprising because K2 is in the second house in the United States chart. And that's a wealth producing house. Okay. So I'm not seeing any kind of a collapse. There will be adjustments, definitely, and we'll feel the first of those adjustments around November 3rd of 2025. But by March of 2026, we'll probably be out of most of those, at least for the United States. If I look at, and again, this can indicate increased involvement in foreign conflicts. If I'm honest about this, this could mean increased involvement in places like Israel, Ukraine, those kinds of situations. But I'd like to think we've learned a little bit from the past about some of those involvements. And I'd like to think the opposition is more embedded than it was during those times. Maybe I'm wrong. Uh, but during this transit, Jupiter's in the seventh house. I think that gives us a little bit more guidance and a little bit more wisdom than perhaps we had before. Maybe I'm being ridiculously optimistic, but I don't think so. And again, one of the things about astrology is not it's not a determinant. It's these are the planetary periods where I'm moving through. This is the karma in the chart. During the Saturn subperiod, the United States could decide to exert more of its colonial instincts. It could decide to focus more on the needs of working people and turn a little bit more inward, try to extricate itself. And I think this Jupiter period, I don't think you're going to see anything like a major economic downturn um, until November 3rd, and actually a very short one because essentially there'll be more demand um, for material goods, but also, like I said, more trouble in the streets, especially around August to, to November of 2026. Ironically enough, this could help the Republicans. This could help the what's traditionally been known as the Conservative Party, because usually when these kinds of conflicts occur, they don't. Um, they'll there'll usually be an urge for some kind of a crackdown or um, increase in law enforcement during these periods. That's what happened in the late 60s when they were allowed to get out of hand, as they did during the Johnson years. They were, that was one of the things that caused Johnson to, it wasn't just the mishandling of the Vietnam War. It was also the fact that there seemed to be a riot every single summertime during the 1960s. So I, I'm thinking this could actually help um, the Republican Congress. I could be wrong about this, and again, I'm more than willing to accept this. K2 is, by definition, a rule-breaking planet, so it doesn't like um, impinging freedoms or something like that. So you could actually see a reversal of policies, especially regarding immigration. But I think the general tendency with Jupiter in the seventh house is that will start, and with Jupiter approaching its exaltation sign of Cancer, that will actually solidify the current approach more so than loosen it up. So I think you'll see some interesting things over the next few months. If I'm looking at the world map, and I don't have a proxy for the world map, but I'll use the now New Bedford map as a proxy. So there will be a lot of conflicts next year, definitely, because people will want everything their way. Okay, we have a Mars, Saturn, and this is also a proxy for this week. We have a Rahu Moon conjunction right now. Rahu's in um, essentially considered to be what's considered to be its own sign. So there'll be a lot of push for technological innovation. That'll affect not only the United States, but also the rest of the world. A lot of competition in that area, but also a lot more what I would call nationalist tendencies. And this is nationalism on all fronts. So people will start to be much more, and I don't differentiate between nationalist tendencies. I have seen some people try to say, well, this kind of nationalism is good, that kind of nationalism is bad. Nationalism is nationalism. Essentially it's us versus them, you know. And since it's tough for uh, people to come together in small groups, it'll more than likely be nations or regions that will be at odds with each other over the next couple of years. So this actual Saturn subperiod, this Saturn aspect in Mars will want super perfectionism. It will want um, Venus and Jupiter are in the 10th house in this chart, so adherence to very high ideals. It'll be an effort to clean up things. There'll definitely be scandals connected with government and government officials. That won't go away, and that'll occur on both sides of the aisle in every country. That won't just occur here in the United States. I can't think of one country that I can look at, and again, it's just from my limited perspective, but I can't think of one country that I can look at that has no problem with its leadership. And depending on which side of the fence you're on, it's either that um, the government is forcing changes in a society that the society doesn't want, or resisting change that the society feels is inevitable. So so this is sort of a deadlock over the next couple of months. And you'll see that even in terms of your personal relationships. There'll be this kind of what I would call stubborn perfectionism in the chart. Venus and Jupiter, and again, I'm not forgetting about the eclipses over here and over here, but it'll cause some scandals definitely to show up very strongly in the United States. But again, they'll show up very strongly on both sides of the aisle. So the Trump administration will suffer and the Democrats will suffer. Okay, so it's not going to be unilateral. Uh, it's not going to be one-sided. Venus and Jupiter are in the 10th house. That's generally good for the economy. Venus moves into um, this sign into Cancer within about 2 weeks. That'll make us more focused on domestic matters and domestic issues. Okay. But Jupiter is going to stay in this sign for the next year. So essentially, people who are locked into their positions will stay locked into their positions at least for through summertime next year. K2 is in the 12th house. So again, the debt limit will keep on piling up. In terms of the short-term effect of tariffs, I don't think we're going to see those really until mid-November. And I don't think they're going to be as dramatic as people say they are. And I do think you'll see tariff deals being made with the last few holdouts um, on tariff negotiations by the end of the year. Okay, so that's a prediction I'm making right now uh, because so India is the most significant tariff partner 18% of their exports go to the United States, at least according to a map that I saw recently. Um, that's not insignificant. It's not almost half their exports to go to other countries. Okay, but that's not insignificant. So I, I don't I definitely don't think the United States has as much leverage with India as it does with other countries, but that's significant. The other thing is we have Sun and Mercury in the 11th house. So the Sun in this sign up until around late summertime will protect the leadership in most countries. But I would say between mid-August and mid-September, you're going to see a lot of changes in administration around the world. And that'll actually continue through mid-October, just because of the transits, and even as late as mid-November, because the sun will be debilitated. So you have essentially 3 months where you'll see rather dramatic changes in leadership. In terms of things like earthquakes, we can expect some more because Mars is in an Earth sign, aspected by Saturn. Um, so we saw that large earthquake off the coast of Russia. We'll probably see more of similar magnitude over the next few months. And I'll look at the world map to see where those are occurring. But that's something to watch out for. Also, some air calamities as well, unfortunately. But again, a lot of technological innovation. In terms of speculation, a lot of people are looking for a market crash to occur pretty soon. And I don't think that's really in the cards. The thing that I am worried about, though, is what I would call speculative investments like Bitcoin, which is a little bit safer now that it's a bit older, and also AI. So, but again, I don't think AI has peaked yet. Artificial intelligence has peaked yet. A lot of the labor market, a lot of the stock market um, boost right now is connected with AI. I don't think their time is really, um, I don't think they're maxing out really for about another year or so. Okay, so, so both of those fields are relatively um, safe, um, but and pharmaceuticals are relatively safe. Um, military is relatively safe, obviously given the large slice of money we give into the Pentagon budget. Um, but communications, I think, will have some problems. That's more due to environmental factors than almost anything else. Also, communications um, will again, at least old guard communications companies will continue to take hits. So legacy networks like NBC, CBS, ABC, the cable news channels, those are essentially scrambling for new audiences right now. And so I think you're going to see um, it's interesting because what we're seeing right now is both a decentralization and a re-centralization of media. So what do I mean by that? Well, basically, a lot of the existing high overhead media outlets that have high-paying celebrities or high-paying anchors are laying off. Okay, so CNN, MSNBC, even Fox are are laying off people. Um, ABC, CBS, NBC. Um, but at the same time, what they're trying to do is they're trying to buy their way into the internet. So you're seeing like really large sums of money being paid for Substack accounts and for uh, and also people who are involved in these networks trying to make a second go of it on YouTube and other channels. So I think that that market's going to expand. Things like Rumble will continue to expand, and uh, all, and you'll probably see other channels come up that are that are competitors for streaming, for self-made videos, and not just short form like TikTok, but but longer form videos. So, and that's mainly because certain things you can't show certain things on YouTube, and some of these other channels will pop up just to um, give an outlet. They're not going to be as big as YouTube just because YouTube has such a legacy and such an imprint right now. It's going to be very difficult to effectively compete against it, but it will have competitors. So let's not talk about that. So again, over the next month and a half, you'll see some shocks in leadership, maybe some shocks. Hopefully, we'll get some resolution to the wars in Ukraine and Israel. But I have a funny feeling that a lot of folks are invested in keeping these things going as long as they can, um, and for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with the key issues they identified for the war starting in the first place. So this is going to be fascinating to watch. Um, so optimistically, when Saturn turns direct, end of November, we might see some resolution of some of these wars. Maybe sooner if I'm being super optimistic. If I'm being negative, you we could see them go on for a couple of more years. If I'm being honest with you. All right. So let's look at the actual chart. We have Aries in the first house right now. Um, and so this is for the actual individual charts. My apologies. I didn't transition that well. I'm sorry. Uh, so Aries has Mars in its sixth house. So this is for people born between April 15th and May 15th, and or else people with Aries moon or Aries rising. So there, this particular this particular group of folks are going to be very competitive, very argumentative, very perfectionistic, um, and they'll end up paying for things that they want done perfectly. Second house Lord is Venus, well placed in the third house, along with Jupiter, so it'll give them good opportunities. It'll make them very expansion driven. That's positive for this sign. But maybe a little bit overly optimistic. I have to caution Aries that you may be being a little bit overly ambitious. Fourth house has Sun and Mercury in it. This isn't a bad combination. There's a lot of focus on projects. Also, Mercury turns direct today, so that's good. So a lot of projects you've been putting off because they haven't felt right, you can take up tomorrow and just move ahead with them. Okay. But again, expect delays over the next 3 weeks. But also, you can get good deals during this 3 week period as well. So Mercury retrograde does have certain benefits, and even the Mercury um, backwash has benefits to it. But communications will still be a little bit uh, difficult. And K2's in the fifth house, so children will be a little bit rebellious or a little bit difficult to discipline. But creativity is very strong. Seventh house Lord is Venus, located in the ninth house. Good luck for spouse, good luck for relationship life. We go over here to the 11th house of gains. There'll be some temporary gains, but they won't feel like they're enough, just to be honest. And Saturn in the 12th does bring heavy expenditure. So, and it'll be to pay off debts or obligations that you had forgotten about. Start trying to pay attention to those now because by the time November, the end of November comes, they'll hit you very hard if you don't pay attention to them now. For Taurus, Taurus has Saturn aspecting the first house, so this is May 15th to June 15th. Jupiter's in the second house along with Venus, so good for financial gains, but Saturn will make the sign feel a little bit hemmed in or restricted. Sun is in the third house. That's good for courage and gain, and also good for communications, especially after tomorrow. K2's in the fourth house. Some disagreements with family members, especially with mothers. And Mars is in the fifth house. Again, children will be a little bit rebellious, a little bit difficult to reason with. Um, Moon is in the 10th house of career, so a little bit of sadness or unhappiness with career. And Saturn, slow gain or a limited gain. And I want to talk about unemployment just a little bit as well. The employment market is shifting a little bit, so I want to talk about with Taurus because a lot of people are unhappy with the jobs they have right now, or they're not making enough money. That'll start to shift over at the end of November as well. So even though I'm seeing some kind of a economic readjustment during that period, I'm also expecting income to increase. Um, let's look at Gemini. Gemini has, so this would be June 15th to July 15th. Gemini has Venus and Jupiter in the first house. Overall, this is a blessed placement. Very good time to start businesses, especially after tomorrow, um, because the Lord of the first house is in the second house. It's about to go direct, and it provides courage or ambition. K2's in the third house. Some sources of unexpected revenue coming in. K2 in Leo is not a bad placement. Actually, this is K2's birthplace. And Mars is in the fourth house. So this is kind of a difficult period to get involved in any kind of a relationship with anybody. But overall, if you've started the relationship or the business agreement before this period started, it's a good time to consolidate it and make sure that everybody understands what their responsibilities are, but not a good time to start a relationship or start a business partnership. Moon and Rahu are in the ninth house. That's actually not a bad placement. The moon will make you a bit anxious about the future. That's showing up in my particular video, so I'm a little bit unconvinced that things are going to be fine. But that Rahu Moon conjunction is essentially saying, yeah, as long as you're clever and you move quickly enough and you're not stubborn and you embrace new technology rather than casting it aside or embrace new opportunities, don't panic. You'll be okay. So that's a good advice for Gemini at work. Saturn in the 10th house, a lot of work connected with the sign, and it'll bring financial gains, but again, a lot of work. For Cancer, this is July 15th to August 15th. Sun and Mercury are in the first house. Venus and Jupiter are in the 12th house. This isn't bad at all financially, but benefics in the 12th house actually allow you to save money. And K2 And sometimes when I'm looking at birth charts, I look at the strongest sign by Sarvastika Varga and take that as being the most important sign. The Sarvastika Varga placements are over here. You don't have access to those from this particular chart, unfortunately. But this allows a person's actions to save money, and I think overall, for this particular chart, um, Cancer will do well in terms of saving money. It'll spend money, but really because of bad communications, but not as much as it saves. K2 is in the second house. This sign will have to work hard to make itself understood. Um, K2 in the second house can bring in unexpected money, though. Um, and maybe even legacies. Mars is in the third house. So Mars in the third house, good for courage for this sign. This sign has more push. Moon is in the eighth house in this chart. Not a particularly good placement, so this sign will feel kind of anxious and it will feel like its luck is really hurt badly. But I think overall you'll see an increased um, improvement of finances if you work hard. Okay? Some problems in relationships, though, because, and this is true for Leo as well, because of that Rahu moon in the eighth house, some anxiety about relationship life. Let's move on to Leo, which is August 15th through September 15th. K2 is placed in the first house. This will make this sign extremely impatient and extremely um, thoughtless in its communications. So this is why Trump's speech patterns have been more um, less well thought out than normal. Although he has Mars in the first house, he hardly needs any encouragement. But for Leos overall, if you see something, don't blow up right away. Just try to calm down because you'll lose or you'll be put at a disadvantage if you blow up. Okay. This is a relatively good time for money, especially if we're talking about foreign investments, or else working in real estate or working with people who are engaged in law. So this is or engaged in construction. So this is a good period for those things. Moon and Rahu are in the seventh house, so relationship partners will seem a little bit difficult to communicate with, a little bit difficult to make happy, and that's true also with this Saturn aspect on Mars. Venus and Jupiter are placed in the 11th house. It means essentially the sign will get nearly everything of what it wants with some minor losses. So again, this isn't necessarily a bad chart. Um, Sun will move into this sign within about a week or so. You'll see some improvement. Although I do have to warn you, this sign, there can be some negative effects on physical health for this sign because of the Sun K2 conjunction. So you have to watch out for allergies or heart issues or things like that. Um, Flus, colds, those kinds of things. Um, Mars is, so again, this is not a bad week for Leo. It's just you have to watch out for the panic on the part of relationship partners. And also you have to watch out for that short temper. For Virgo, Virgo has, this is September 15th to October 15th. Virgo has good gains, good financial gains, especially after tomorrow. Good luck in work. However, some restrictions or some disappointments. And it's mainly because of Saturn aspecting this particular sign. So it'll be tough to get things done quickly with Saturn because relationship partners will seem a little bit averse to doing things until everything's absolutely spot on and correct. Okay. Um, the other The other sign placement here that I'm really concerned about with Virgo is the Rahu moon in the sixth house. This can be hypochondria, so thinking you're sick when you're not really sick, or else rivals at work. Okay, so people bad mouthing you at work. Saturn in the seventh house, relationship life, not the best time to start a relationship, if I'm honest. If it's somebody you know for a while, maybe that's suitable. Venus and Jupiter in the 10th house, as I said, good for luck, good for financial gains, just not so good for enemies on the job or long-term relationships. Good for money, though. Okay, very good for money for the sign. For a Libra, Libra has a cluster of planets all approaching its 10th house or in its 10th house. So you'll see within about 2 weeks, you'll see Venus and Mercury in the 10th house. That will make career life flow more smoothly. It'll also have some benefits in career life starting next week because Mercury is retrograde. So certain people who had promised payment or uh, seem hesitant to commit to you will all of a sudden commit to you within about 2 weeks, maybe earlier. And K2's in the 11th house. So again, you should expect criticism from friends. That's not something I'm happy to say to Libra. That's October 15th to November 15th. But basically, this is the same situation that Joe Biden found himself in during the last election cycle. His friends become enemies, basically, or his friends become his worst critics. Um, Mars is in the 12th house. Mars aspects Saturn, so there can be increased expenses on cars and real estate. This has sort of been the condition of the sign for a little while right now, but that's going to continue. Rahu and Moon are in the fifth house. So it's a great creative time for this particular sign, but there may be unrealistic expectations in terms of occupation. So you may want to be taking on like about a half a dozen things at once. That's fine, but just realize that not all these things are going to flower. So there may be some things you may have to give up a bit later on or push back a little bit because they're unrealistic at the time. Okay? So this isn't necessarily a negative. It's actually a positive because you have the Lord of the 10th in the fifth house with Rahu, which is a Raj Yoga. But again, Rahu does tend to bite off more than it can chew. Certain things will slip out the back door, metaphorically speaking. So essentially, yeah, it's a good time to be ambitious. Just make sure you don't split your attention in too many different directions, and um, you'll be largely successful. But again, this is a good time to take on additional projects to pursue things that you wanted to pursue for a long time. But realizing that not all of them may work out exactly the way you want them to. Saturn's in the sixth house. Hard work is indicated for the sign. Um, and a lot of do-overs, both because of K2 in the 11th house and also the Mars-Saturn mutual aspect. Jupiter and Venus in the ninth house, excellent combination for learning. People will really think you're smart even if you're not. And just a really lucky time for this particular sign. Okay, so that continues really over the next 3 months, I would say. For Scorpio, Scorpio has Kodanda in the first house, which is sort of like a little Venus in the first house. And what that sort of means is it has sort of like the blessings of some small Venusian light blessings. So it'll be attractive to the opposite sex. It'll have opportunities with the opposite sex. Married Scorpios should watch out because they'll have opportunities for to cheat on their spouse. But the Rahu Moon conjunction, there's a lot of concern about keeping home life together. And Saturn in the fifth, I'm going to have to hold this microphone in my hand because it just let go. Saturn in the fifth indicates Saturn in the fifth indicates some problems or some letdowns with children. Venus, Jupiter in the eighth house is kind of a sexy placement, if I'm honest. People are very attracted to the sign, given that combination. And Sun and Mercury are in the ninth house. That's good for career life, although not, although points of recognition, but not consistent, and also gains from real estate or from um, assets like metals or jewelry. For Sagittarius, Sagittarius has Jupiter and Venus in the seventh house. This is a nice combination, so it should open up a lot of relationship opportunities for you. And Rahu are in the third house. There is some risk-averse behavior. There's some um, hesitancy about entering into new partnerships, but overall, with this blessing in the seventh house over here, I wouldn't hold back. Saturn's in the fourth house. Home life is a little bit oppressive or a little difficult. Mom, or if mother's still alive, could be having some health issues and also be very critical. Sun and Mercury are in the eighth house. Again, it's a good sign of sexual attractiveness if you have planets in the eighth house of a chart. Ketu's in the ninth house. Good for expansion of interests and good for exploring new information. Mars is in the 10th house, really good for new work. For Capricorn, Capricorn has Saturn in the third house. Its Lord Saturn is in the third house. Uh, this is a good placement. It will make the sign brave, but again, it will make it a little bit greedy, a little bit, trying to think of the right word, a little bit dissatisfied with how much money it's bringing in. Um, so I'm not going to judge on that. That's the individual's sign's determination. Venus and Jupiter are in the sixth house. This indicates good relationships with coworkers. Seventh house, uh, overall Sun in the seventh house gives kind of a bossy spouse or relationship partner, or maybe you'll be spending a lot of time with the boss. But Mercury, as Lord of the ninth house, gives you good promotional opportunities during this transit. Mars is in the ninth house, so work hard and push hard, and you'll succeed this month. For Aquarius, Aquarius has that Rahu Moon conjunction, so it's obsessed with new things. It's obsessed with things it doesn't have right now, or things it wanted in the past, and it's going to pursue those kind of aggressively. Saturn's in the second house, so there are some limits on his finances. Venus and Jupiter in the fifth house. This can give potential for love affairs or romantic involvements. Mercury and Sun are in the sixth house, can give some lowering of energy levels at different times of the day, especially in the morning. And K2's in the seventh house, so unexpected developments in relationship matters. Mars is in the eighth, so probably not the best time to get involved in a new relationship, as the relationship partner may use you. And okay, so and that having been said, also use money that you don't have. So Aquarians should be cautious about new relationships. Love affairs are okay. That's but long-term relationships, uh, not the right time. Love affairs or dating, fine, but long-term relationships, no. For Pisces, finally, our last sign, but definitely not our least sign. We have Saturn in the first house, so this sign will feel like it's under a lot of pressure to do something. It will also feel just a little bit depressed at times, but in search of education, really interested in education. Mercury and Sun are in the fifth house. Overall, this is a good indication of luck through hard work. Mars is in the seventh house. Like Aquarius, not a good time to start long-term relationships. So I'd hesitate on that for at least 2 months for Pisces. And finally, we have Moon and Rahu in the 12th house. This means spending money on new inventions or new innovations. So overall, not a bad chart for Pisces, but I would watch out for long-term relationships. You'll have relationship partners who are either difficult or bullies. Let me just go to the time and space map. This is part three and the last part of this wonderful broadcast. Okay, so this is the astro map. So interestingly enough, I think I did say, and this could be me pulling out a false memory, but I think I did say there was going to be some earthquake activity close to Alaska, and that in fact did happen. So we have a Mercury line running through. So we have a Jupiter and Venus line running up over here through the Pacific, and a Mercury line running up close to Alaska and the west and the easternmost part of the Soviet Union, or Russia, excuse me, Russia. So at least from this particular chart, some possibility of additional earthquake activity, especially with the sun being in this particular sign. And especially I would expect to see that within about a month if it does happen. Okay. Um, Moon is in the west, the eastern part of Alaska, excuse me. And this does indicate some potential for flooding over here or large ice packs. Um, it's sort of hitting Western Canada. As I've said before, Western Canada is, or at least most parts of it, are very upset with the Toronto government. I'm sorry, with the Ottawa government, and they are making steps towards secession. Um, this moon that close and this Rahu over here tend to make it more likely there'll be demonstrations or maybe even conflicts. Uh, and I know that sounds weird coming from Canada, but it's sort of a that part of the country. It's not really been covered all that much um, in most media, but there are referendums afoot to call for Alberta um, and Saskatchewan, and I believe this region right here. I can't remember the name of the region. I'm sorry. Seceding from Canada. So it's interesting. We'll keep on watching this. But this Rahu does indicate a lot of dissatisfaction. And this goes all the way down through Idaho, Nevada, and into California. So I doubt you're going to see another recall election in California, but there has been increased fire activity. There's, interestingly enough, and there are indications of a scandal brewing in this region of the United States, probably a political scandal. Uh, Texas has this strong Mars Saturn line running through it, and that goes all the way up to North and South Dakota. and up through central Canada. And I think you're going to see a lot. So there's been a lot of talk about um, Texas changing its election or doing redistricting. There may be some fights or demonstrations or some delays enacted in connection with that. And also, if we go up here, we have some problems in North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska as well. So I can't indicate what kinds of problems those are, but uh, you might expect to see some violent acts out there. There's a Venus-Jupiter line running through um, Illinois all the way down to um, Alabama and all the way down through Central America, uh, especially El Salvador. So I think what that generally tends to mean is these governments are going to become more traditionally minded, more um, concerned with the welfare of their citizens, less concerned with how other people view them. And there'll probably be a lot of court battles down there as well. There's a Mercury line just off the coast of uh, Canada and New England, and that can indicate more news coming out about the government, although this is a kind of a slow news month, and also changes coming to um, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, and uh, Guyana, okay, Brazil, and Bolivia and Argentina. So Argentina has shown very strong economic growth over the past few years. Excuse me, my chair is creaking. And there'll be some disputes with the government in Brazil over the next month or so. We have a moon line running over Greenland and down to Brazil. And this could indicate some panic about the economy in both areas. Um, there's an Iceland, there's a Rahu line running through Iceland as well. And again, we might see some minor volcanic or earthquake activity around Iceland as well and around the Canaries. There's a Mars line running through Ireland and Portugal and Morocco and down into I believe that's Ghana. And I think what you're going to see in these regions is essentially a lot of violent or difficult behavior over the next few months. Um, there are no lines next to England, but England and Scotland are close to a Mars line. So is Spain. So I would expect to see those regions also have some domestic problems. The next line that shows up is a Venus line. Venus lines. So this is running through Libya, Algeria, or close, and up through Greece, up through Eastern Europe, and all the way up through Ukraine and towards Moscow. And this to me indicates some problems with flooding or some problems with or some anxiety about the state of the government over the next month. Let's see now. Yeah, that Venus Jupiter line. So I would see a lot of water activity in this line over here. Okay. Mercury is running through Israel, so we know where Israel's in the news a lot lately. Israel, uh, Egypt, down into the Sudan and down into Western Africa, down to regions like Mozambique, and touching South Africa. So, so you'll definitely hear more news about them. Turkey as well and Eastern Europe. For there's a sun line running through Saudi Arabia, Iran, and even through Russia. And this to me indicates change in leadership within about a month and a half's time. Okay. So it may not be the supreme leader, but definitely change in leadership. There's a moon line running through Iran, and also through Afghanistan and into Russia. And just touching on Afghanistan. I'm sorry, just touching on Pakistan. My apologies. So thanks. Yeah, some moon line. So again, some more potential for flooding, some more potential for damage to that part of the world. Um, there's a Saturn and Mars line running up through into Russia, but through India, Bangladesh, and Ladakh, and into what used to be Tibet. So this does indicate some increased attention on detail and also increased attention on how to make yourself um, more aggressive. Okay, so um, yeah, so the Saturn Mars line is interesting because it looks like people want to fight, but they're not sure they should. So that's usually safe for another couple of months. Okay, for Myanmar, which I have seen as essentially um, tanking or you know, going under. There's some possibility of rebirth because of these Jupiter and Venus signs going through here, and also all of the Southeastern Asian region through uh, Thailand, Malaya, and Cambodia and Vietnam looks like um, there'll be some relative prosperity for those areas. I'll be touching Indonesia just a little bit as well. The next line is a Mercury line, which is going through China. So China will have um, very little luck in terms of um, increasing communications or getting people to work more steadily. Same is true of Borneo, same is true of Western Australia. So you're not seeing a lot of motivation happen right now in those parts of the world. The government's going to have to compel them to work. Let me just go over here. And there's a sun line running up through Japan and into the Koreas and into Russia. So the sun line is important in terms of confidence, is in terms of action in the world. So it's essentially the sun sign is uh I apologize. The next area is so that Venus Jupiter line looks positive for the region, but the Mercury and the Sun line do not, because there'll have to be some force of arms brought to bear to make this part of the world produce at the levels um, per it was producing priorly. Japan is sort of stuck in between the sun and moon line, so it's worried that it can keep up. And it's also worried about its trade relations. It's trading well with Guinea and South Africa, but I think what you're what you're seeing, I'm sorry, Australia, not South Africa. My apologies. You're seeing with that moon line running through uh, Australia some dissatisfaction with the government, some scandals connected with the government, and also some demand for a governmental shift. And that holds true for New Zealand. So there are a lot of government shift options. The ones I would say are most likely are Western uh, United States, Canada, um, let me just see now, Brazil, excuse me. Uh, let me just see now, India, Korea, Japan, Australia, and parts of China. Okay, so that's it for me for this week. Thank you very much for staying so long and watching the entire lecture. Sorry, I started to fade out towards the end there. I do that occasionally, as you've seen. And I'll be back next week with more. If there's any topic you would like me to cover, uh, please let me know. I'll be happy to cover it for you. I apologize for spending so much time on the United States chart today, but I felt it was important. And I want to analyze the rest. I'll be spending more time on other countries, not just the United States, over the next few months. Um, and it's mainly because of the United States is such a large, number one, I'm located in the United States, as I'm sure most of my audience is. But number two, the United States is such a large cog in the world economy. Um, despite BRICS, despite the European Union, despite China, is still the number one economy in the world. Now, it may not be for much longer, I don't know, but I'm tending to think that people who are saying it's going to slide are a little bit um, overly anticipatory. Uh, uh, I, I'm not at all sure the United States' best days are over. And again, it isn't because I'm necessarily super patriotic. It's just because I don't think I don't I don't I think we're near a peak, but I don't think we're at a peak. Okay, so that's just so that's just my take on it. And I still think we have more in common with Europe, Russia, and India than current headlines would lead us to believe, and also with South America. So it isn't to say we're enemies with Africa or China, that's not it, or with Japan, but um, um, I think I I I think we'll see some shifts in alliances over the next few years. Okay, my friends. All right, so that's it. And I'll let you go home right now to your loved ones. It's a Sunday, and I have some stuff to take care of as well. And so I'll see you next week. Don't forget to send me any of your questions. I'll be happy to try to answer them. And again, my door is always open for study or for readings. Okay? Thank you very much and have a great day. I love you all. Bye bye now.